Hey folks, John Henning here with the Franchise Radio Show, and I'm super excited today. Today we're going to be talking to Angela Thompson. Now, Angela is the CEO and founder of Freedom Franchise Consultants. Angela, thank you so much for jumping on with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Now, before we get into the business stuff, if anybody's listened to any of my episodes, they know that I'm a big people person. So I believe firmly that people do business with people. And so before we get into all that business stuff, which we will definitely go through, tell us a little bit about Angela, who you are, where you're from. Give us just some insight on you as a person.
Yeah, thank you for that. So let's see. Come from humble beginnings, certainly. Grew up in a very small town, northwest, about an hour northwest of the Houston, Texas area, with my mother, my stepfather, my two brothers. My father was a mechanic my whole life, taught a little bit at our local high school. My mother worked for the Postal Service. Once I graduated high school, I just felt like small town life was not my jam. It just wasn't for me. So I fled the town as quickly as I could.
Okay.
Wanted to get out into the world, see what was out there, made my way around the Houston area for a number of years, then finally settled in a suburb west of the city. Which is also where I met my husband and started my franchise. And actually about a year ago, believe it or not, swore I would never come back to this small town, but guess where I am now?
Return to the roots, right?
Back in the small town. I guess I just didn't have an appreciation for it back then like I do now. And so we live back in my hometown with our 12-year-old daughter and our 6 dogs, and we love it. We absolutely love it here.
All right, good deal. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. I grew up in a small town myself, and we live in a small town now because obviously with what we all do, we can literally do it from anywhere, right?
Yes. And that is what I love, is the ability, now to, the freedom to kind of live. You can pretty much live anywhere and find something, that you can do to make a living. I think that's really neat.
Hey, I was fully remote before it was cool to be fully remote. Okay.
Okay. You started the trend there, huh?
That's right. Yeah. 15, 18 years ago, I moved to a fully remote position, and I haven't been in a corporate office since then. Let's jump into a little bit of the business stuff here. Now, let's tell our listeners, what is it that you do? What is a franchise consultant? Kind of give us the rundown on what you do and how you help folks.
Sure. So to put it very simply, I'm a franchise matchmaker. But to go into a little bit more detail, I have the privilege of working with individuals across the nation who are interested in business ownership through franchising, but aren't quite sure what that looks like. What are the steps, to get there? Maybe they've considered it, and maybe they were intimidated by the process, or, Google can be information overload. I hear that a lot of times. And so people who are interested in being their own boss, specifically through franchise ownership, what I do is walk them through a process that allows me the opportunity to get to really know who they are, what makes them tick, what their interests are, what their long-term and short-term goals are. Just really gathering information to figure out what would be the best fit for that individual from a franchise perspective, right? And then I take all of that information, and I've got an inventory of franchise partners that I work with, and I match people to those different brands based on that criteria, and then walk them through the process of discovering more about those businesses to see, which of them they would ultimately like to invest in and become a business owner themselves. So that's a very kind of high level overview of what that looks like as a consultant.
That's perfect. So a franchise matchmaker, right? 2 words. You can sum it right down. You take the information and help them find their needs and wants, right? And figure out who they are and what's important to them. And you match them up to the franchises that might be a fit, and then do the introductions and help them through that due diligence. Now, what is the cost for your service, right? I'm sure that's one of the big questions, is how does a client pay you?
Yeah, great question. That's always, I feel like, when I'm doing an introduction call with a candidate, the first call, and just telling them about my services, I feel like that's the elephant in the room for a while, because I'm telling them, hey, I help with this, I provide resources, I give you guidance and all of that. And they're like, wow, this all sounds great, but how much does it cost?
Right.
So I love when I get to tell people that my service is of no cost to them whatsoever. And they, of course, they want to know, well, how is that possible, right? You don't do this for fun, although it is fun. But ultimately, franchise consultants are compensated by the franchisor through a referral fee. Because think about it. We're doing a lot of the legwork for them, right? They're being inundated with inquiries, day after day, week after week. And we're bringing qualified candidates to them that have already, they know a little bit about the concept, they're financially qualified. And so we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So that franchisor says, thank you so much, Angela, for doing all this work for us. Here you go. So yeah, so we get to provide our services at no cost to our clients.
That's great. So kind of almost similar to like a headhunter a little bit, but a little more in detail on what's important to them and finding the needs and the wants and the true matchmaker scenario. But it's no different than someone helping you find a career, an executive level position then.
Exactly. Yes. I've heard other consultants put it that way. It's kind of like kind of how a recruiter is compensated.
Sure.
Very similar to that.
Now, we had talked about this briefly before. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show. How did you get into franchising? Kind of start at your last career and bring us up to where you are today. What did that journey look like for you?
So that journey started over 20 years ago. I was working, I had an entry-level management job at a big box retail store. Really loved my job, had intentions of growing with that company. But I was working my way through school, working my way through college class by class. And I decided one semester to take a break from school. I wanted to just catch up on some bills and things like that. I was like 20 at the time. And I found online this part-time job as a gymnastics instructor. And as a gymnast growing up my whole life, it was something I was passionate about. I thought, what a cool part-time job. Let me take a look at that. So applied, interviewed, got hired for the job. It was a franchise. About 3 months into that, I decided to quit my full-time job and work there. I got promoted to a director position, worked my way up kind of through the ranks over the years. I worked for a franchise owner. They were a multi-unit owner, so they had multiple locations that they owned. I ended up becoming the general manager of those 4 locations for them. Did that for, a number of years, like 13, 14 years. The owner decided that, well, the ultimate goal, at least in my heart, was that I wanted to own one of those franchises one day. I was going to make it happen no matter what I needed to do. And so I'm saving money. I'm trying to figure it out, all those years. There was a point where the owner decided she didn't want to sell any of them. And that made me take a little bit of a turn in my career. I decided to go back to school, get a master's degree in a whole different field. When I was in my last semester of my master's degree to pursue a completely different career, she came back to me and said, "Hey, Angela, I think I'm ready to sell now."
Oh boy.
Yeah. So I was a single mom. I was finishing my last semester of my master's degree. I was doing an internship. I was in school to be a mental health counselor.
Okay.
And I bought a franchise. So yeah. So that's
what you do in your spare time.
In my, maybe sleep sometimes in my spare time. I don't know. But yeah, there were so many obstacles and hurdles along the way. I was really fortunate that the owners, were willing to let me feel that sense of ownership when I was managing the business. And that's really where I got to learn the ins and outs of franchising and what that really meant. I got to work with our corporate office and write some curriculum. And I just really had such a passion for it. And knowing franchise owners in the system who had never owned a business prior to that, that were able to be successful through this, that's just what really sparked that passion in me. And so I bought that franchise location, owned it for years. We unfortunately had to go through, being shut down during the pandemic. We were closed down for 11 weeks. And kind of like starting from scratch almost, and so we had to kick it into high gear, make some changes, adapt. And about a year after that, a couple years into that, I got approached by a buyer. He wanted to buy multiple locations across Texas, and he asked if I had considered selling. And I thought, well, I feel like any smart business owner is always willing to hear an offer, right?
Sure.
Yeah, and so we worked out a deal, and I couldn't pass it up. It wasn't honestly in my plan. I didn't plan to sell my business that early on. I still was very passionate about it. I enjoyed it. But it was just, it just when I thought about it, it was the right time. So I ended up selling that
Okay.
business. And then I was like, okay, well, what do I do now? This is all I've known for the last, 18 years of my life. And as I started doing some research, I stumbled across franchise consulting. And I thought, no way I can have a business that helps other people become franchise owners.
You got the experience, you got the
Yeah,
information.
wild.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So I was pumped. I just thought, wow, this is what I want to do. And that's how we got here.
Great, great. Let's shift gears here just for a minute. I want to dig into on the people side of things versus the business side. Like, what types of folks are you generally working with? Who is out there looking for franchises that need your service?
Oh, good question. Oh, it's all over the board. That's one of the things I love about being a consultant. I talk to people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds, different stories to tell, right? Um, People who are um, maybe approaching retirement,
Okay.
and they are looking for, another stream of income once they reach that retirement age, but they also want, those freedoms and flexibilities that come with being a business owner.
Hmm.
Maybe some passive income. People who are just wanting to diversify their portfolio, right? Maybe keep their corporate job or keep doing whatever it is they're doing, but add something to the mix. Corporate refugees, people who just, want out, they want to be their own boss. Like I said, maybe they just didn't really know what to do or how to accomplish that. Also some stay-at-home moms, moms who are, their kids have gotten older, they're in school, maybe they don't really want to go look for a job, they'd like to do something for themselves. And so they,
Sure.
they look into franchise ownership. But yeah, I mean, the stories I hear are so different every day, but really, there's a few things, that I look for when I'm talking to someone and telling them about what I do. And if those things are a good fit, we move on through the process and take it from there.
That's great to hear. If somebody's looking to buy a franchise, it seems like there's not a particular stereotype, right? It seems like you've got a lot of different channels of folks there from all walks of life that you're able to help out, and from the soccer mom to the corporate executive, right?
Absolutely. And that's what I love about it. And that's what I think people get caught up in that sometimes.
Mhm.
I talk to individuals who, I've always wanted to do this, but I don't know that I'm capable of it, and I'm like, well, tell me about that.
Yeah.
Right. Because they think that there is a certain type of person, you know, uh, that looks into franchise ownership. And that's just not the case.
No, no. Now let's talk about the process here a little bit. How does the process work? I said, "Hey, Angela, I'm interested. What does that look like? Is it phone calls, Zoom, information? How are we doing the process?"
So I have a process that I like to follow. I can be flexible because there are certain reasons why changing things or tweaking things a little bit might be more appropriate,
Mhm.
for that person. But in general, typically it starts with a first just quick phone conversation. I'm assessing for three things. Fit, is franchise ownership the right fit for this person, right? It's not for everyone. And that's okay, because if everyone was a business owner, we'd have no one to work in our business, right?
Right.
So is it the right fit? Financially, are they in a place or in a position financially where they are not just able, but also willing,
Right.
right, to
Right.
invest in a franchise? And then also timing. The other two things, the other two check boxes might be there, but the timing may not be right. Maybe they need to wait till their kids are off to college, or, like I have a gentleman I'm working with who's potentially moving across the country, so sometimes the other two things are there, maybe the timing's not right. So I'm really looking for those three key components. And if that is there and they're interested in taking the next step, um, I provide them with just simple, I call it a goals assessment.
Okay.
And they just fill that out, tell me a little bit about themselves, what they're looking for, what their goals are, what kind of budget they have in mind. Just some simple questions like that. Now, the next step is we hop back on the phone and have another call. We can do Zoom if they're more comfortable with that. Most people I've found just They're good with phone calls, right?
Mhm.
Nobody
Yep.
wants to turn that camera on anymore.
No, no.
So, and this piece I think is one of my favorite parts of the process. This is where we take a deep dive into that goals assessment, and I really get to know who this person is, so that I can start thinking about what are some concepts and brands out there that are going to match who this person is, what they're looking for, what their goals are. And I love that because I just get to know them, on a deeper level. And, we get to build some trust. They get to know me a little bit better. All of this is done over the phone, I mean,
Cool.
they're essentially sharing this information with a stranger. So I do the very best that I can to establish that rapport and build trust with my clients and get to know them. And then from there, I take that information and I start doing my research. I start digging into, what franchise brands would be a good fit based on the information they've provided to me. And
Mhm.
then once I've done that, we hop back on a call and I share those brands with them. And the goal is to identify, one or two options that they would like to move forward with as far as me introducing them to the franchisor. Because consultants, we have a limited amount of information. There are some things that have to be disclosed by the franchisor, and so we're kind of the middle person, just providing them with enough information to get a good feel for that brand, and then we connect them to the franchisor if they're ready for that, and then they roll out the red carpet for them from there
Mm.
and provide them and start doing the due diligence and going through discovery. But also in that process, John, I'm there to provide my client with resources. There's a lot of franchise lingo. What the heck is an FDD and what are all these items and what does this mean? And so I've got resources and collateral and things that I send to my clients so they really start to understand the industry and just can better understand that process as they're doing their due diligence.
Are you working with them ongoing or just in the beginning? What does that look like as they start to engage with the franchisors and they're looking at all this information? Are you still available to them throughout the process then too?
I am absolutely available throughout the entire process. I really go with what the candidate feels comfortable with.
Sure.
Some of them once you hand them over and there, because it's a lot of for them to digest into things that they're reading over, and so sometimes they just kind of want to do that themselves. But I'm always available, and I make sure that they know that I'm here to help in any way that I can. And then I have some who they want me there side by side with them, and that is fine too. So I'm really at their disposal based on what they want that to look like and how much they want me to be involved in the
Makes
process.
sense. Yeah, depending, everybody's a little different, somewhat more and somewhat a little less. That's good that you're flexible like that. You have it available, but it's nothing that's required if they want someone to talk with through that. Now, this next question I'm going to ask you, right? I'm sure it's like one of the top questions. It almost has to be, in my opinion. Does anybody ever ask you, Angela, what is the best franchise?
I'm grinning over here because as soon as you started to say that, I knew exactly what you were what you
Yeah.
were going to ask. I get asked that question quite often, and you know that's a tricky one. The best franchise is the one that's best for that individual, right?
Sure.
The one that fits best, like I said, that aligns with their values, their goals, their objectives, and all of those things. So the answer is, if someone says, well, what's the best franchise? I said, well, once we go through this process, I can tell you what I feel like would be the best ones for you, right?
Right.
As far as in general, there's so many incredible businesses out there. I mean, it would be hard to, answer that question. That's a trick question.
It is. And, I asked it on purpose. Of course, I already knew the answer, but
Yeah.
it's important for our folks, our listeners here to understand that is part of the consulting process is for you to help them identify what is important to them. What do they want to do every day? What type of investment they want to make? So
Right.
it's so broad of a question to say what they're looking for is, hey, Angela's the franchise expert. Maybe she's got the inside, right? She's got the
Right.
inside scoop on something. But the
Right.
reality is that the best way to do it is to go through that process, because I know for sure, with as much experience as I have and you have, is has anyone ever come to the table and thought something, this is what I think I want to own, and then you go through your process and it's something completely different and they come back to you and say, oh my gosh, I never would have thought about that. I'm so glad you presented it to me. Has that ever happened?
It does happen. It actually happened today.
Yep.
I was on a call with a couple up here in Texas that I'm working with, and they were dead set on something in, quick service restaurant, coffee, something of that sort, right?
Sure.
And we've gone through the process of presented some things to them. They were really looking at it, and then we hopped on a call today, and I said, okay, well, where are we at? They said, we don't like any of them. I said, okay, that's okay. Tell me why you don't like them. They're like,
Right.
we thought this is what we wanted. When we thought franchise, we thought business owners, this is what we thought we wanted. But the more we think about it, that's not at all what we want. It was about like the everyday face-to-face interaction,
Sure.
which I can understand. That can be very exhausting for some people, right? And so once they thought about it, they realized, okay, that's not the direction we want to go. So now we're looking at some home-based, like service-based businesses,
Sure.
which is going to be a better fit. But that's the beauty of the process, right? It's not linear. We don't go from A to Z. It's a process, right? But that's what I love about it, is that we get to explore at that level, and find what's going to be the best fit for someone. And sometimes that's them seeing things that they thought they wanted and realizing, oh, okay, never mind, that's not what and
Boy,
being
am I
okay.
glad I talked to you is what they're thinking, right? Because they would have went weeks and months through a process with a franchisor and realized, holy cow, this really isn't actually what I wanted to do. I thought I did. So they
Right.
not only save the time, but the effort, and they're able to focus in on the things that really are important to them that they're really looking for in a business then.
Right. That's a great point, John. Absolutely. That, working with a consultant that does eliminate, it saves them a lot of time, going through that process to then realize that that's not what they want to do. We can figure that out much quicker this way.
Now, let's talk about you said you work with folks nationwide. Are there any hot areas throughout the country that are big growth opportunities out there? Have you seen any trends?
Well, that's kind of similar to the what's the best franchise question, I would say. Um, think about something along the lines of like short-term rental property management, right?
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
that's not really going to do well here in my little town in, Texas,
Hmm.
but might be popping in Miami, or somewhere else. So you'll see, different types of franchises that might have some hot spots. Or,
Okay.
if a franchisor, maybe they started up in the Northeast and it gained popularity there and started, because people are seeing them, right? And going,
Sure.
ooh, what's that? What's that? So you do kind of see, where they were established at the beginning. You can kind of see it kind of grow out from there, and it then, expand across the US. But as far as like, any specific area of the country that's growing faster or big, it really depends on the business itself. It really does.
Yeah, and I kind of knew the answer to that one too, and that's kind of why I threw it out there, because a lot of folks think, "Oh, I have to be in a certain area or I have to be in a certain type of market." And I found in my experience that it depends, right? It depends
Yeah.
on what it is, what they want to do, where they want to go, how far do they want to go, what do they want to do every day. All of that stuff factors in.
And that's also part of the process that we go through together in the matchmaking process is, if we land on a couple of things, it's like thinking about that, is this, do I live in an area where, that this particular business is targeted at, right? Like,
Sure.
does that meet that? So that's part of that process as well with the client.
Yeah, it might be a great business, but it just may not work in that area. And that's part of the process, is learning that. And I think that's one of the big things that I always take away from talking with folks like yourself, is that there's so much information that people don't know they don't know about franchise.
It's funny, you're nailing it today, because I had a client say that exact thing today. She
Mhm.
said, we don't know what we don't know. And I'm like, yeah, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to work
Right.
together, and we're going to learn.
I love it. I'm just as passionate about franchising as you are. I can already tell. So, now, if somebody were interested in owning a franchise, what type of financial resources should they be bringing to the table? Is there a certain type of capital amount, liquid, net worth? There's a lot of terms that are out there, but what should someone bring to the table and say, hey, I want to look at franchises. This is what I've got. It's not going to be the first thing you talk about, but it's going to come up in the conversation. So what should they be bringing to the table? Just a rough idea.
It's certainly a critical component, right? That's such a great question, because I think that when people think of franchise, they think, oh, I must have hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars or whatever that might look
Yep.
like, in their mind. And that's just not yes, you need to come to the table with, some cash in the bank. That's going to look different for every different franchisor. They're all going to have different liquidity requirements. They're going to have, the total investment on that business is going to vary from brand to brand. You want to have you want to have a good credit score, probably, minimal credit card debt. The liquidity piece of it, again, that just, that is something that I'm really not afraid to broach that subject with my candidates because
Mhm.
it's such a big piece of the process, right?
Yeah.
And if someone's looking for maybe a specific type of business or a specific industry they want to get into, and they share with me, well, I have, this much, in liquid capital and I can maybe finance this much. If they're not quite there yet, I just tell them, well, hey, let's work toward getting to that place financially, right?
Mhm.
And then we can get into there. So yeah, definitely having some, some cash and a good credit history. We have lending experts, that they're gurus. I think the statistic is 90% of franchises are funded with a combination of cash and financing, right?
Sure. Yep.
So there are so many different options out there, and we've got people that can work with them to determine what that could look like for them.
Now, I asked that question because of the answer you gave, which was a lot of folks think they have to have a lot more, the hundreds and hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to invest. And it probably holds a lot of people back that are financially qualified to take a look at what I call an everyday franchise. Now, yeah, to qualify for a McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, you may need to have that capital, but not for the other 3,600 franchises that are out there. It's only that core group of those big,
Right,
fast food type franchises, right? All the rest of them, it's a much, much different scenario. And I love the
right.
fact that you pointed out again, it depends on the situation, right? It depends on the
Yeah,
concept, the franchisor,
yeah.
who's contributing what and their actual credit scores and the other factors that play into it, right?
Right. And that's why I really hesitate to throw specific
Yeah.
numbers out there because, there are franchisors that don't have a net worth requirement,
Hmm.
or and then there are others that do. And so it's really about sitting down to, having that conversation, looking at where, the client is and then seeing where that puts them, right? And sometimes people want to say, you know what, let me keep working on this. Let me save a little bit more. Let me get these things going because then that's going to open up. The more cash you have on hand, the more you're able, that opens up your options, of course,
Sure.
significantly, right?
Yep.
But what I don't want people to do is discredit themselves because they think that they don't, if they don't have $100,000 in cash or whatever it might be, $1 million in the bank, $1 million,
Right.
multi-million dollar, that they can't qualify to be a franchise owner because it's just not the case.
Now, if I were an entrepreneur thinking about exploring franchise ownership, what would be the best way for us to start our conversation? Do you like to, me to set up a phone call, go to your website? What's the best way for me to reach out to you if I'm listening to this and I'm an entrepreneur?
Yeah, the very best way is I love having that first phone call and getting to know people and hearing their story and determining if this is a good fit for them, or if it's not right now, what are some steps that we can take to get there if this is something that they really want to do, right? So a phone call is great. My website, people can reach me through my website very easily, fill out the form there, and all of my contact information is there as well. But yeah, that first phone call is really the one that kind of sets the tone for everything else.
Good deal. We'll make sure to include all the contact information underneath of the audio for you as well. Now, as we go to the end here and the recap and wrap it up here at the end, Angela, I want to give you kind of the last couple of minutes here. Just take us through just a real quick recap of what you do, how you work with folks, and that type of stuff. Just take us right through to the end here.
Sure, sure. So, like I said, my passion and my business as a consultant is helping individuals who are interested in business ownership through franchise ownership achieve that by having a series of conversations to get to know them, to understand their goals, their objectives, what they want to do on a daily basis, how many employees do they want to manage or not manage, are they looking for something home-based, what industries, just all of that information. What makes them want to wake up every morning, and run off to work. Gathering all of that information, and then I get to work for my client researching franchise brands that could be a great fit, provide them with information so that they can determine which of those brands they'd like to take the next step with. And that's where I would introduce them directly to the franchisor so they can really deep dive and do the due diligence.
That's great. Well, there you have it, folks. John Henning here with the Franchise Radio Show. And today we were joined by Angela Thompson, the CEO and founder of Freedom Franchise Consultants. Angela, thank you so much.
Thank you, John.